Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Dr. Ram Hard Drive, and this is a level 9 hoarded house. There are only 9 levels. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, that doesn't look all that bad, the kitchen is not what makes it a level 9. There are 2 rooms in this house, both bedrooms, spare rooms, that are hoarded over the top of my head, and you can't even open the doors. But beyond that, it's not just the visuals that dictate the level of the hoard. There are other factors that go into it. So for instance, you can look up 9 levels of hoarding on Google image search, and they'll give you kind of a visual representation of what that looks like. But some of the other factors are things like safety, biohazards, functionality, accessibility, the age of the hoard could be a factor, and really all of those things come into play with this particular house. This was so badly piled up that most of the kitchen wasn't accessible, and that's the room we're going to be working on today because we've actually spent 4 days at this house. We got the entire kitchen done, and the living room is only what I would consider to be half done. I have to go back to the house this weekend and continue where I left off. But I do have the house functionally safe and accessible, which is like the bare minimum of what I was going for. So anyway, we're going to show you the kitchen. It's pretty nuts because I lost count of the amount of mouse nests that I found in this house. And the whole floor, a lot of the shelving and cabinets and countertops were just completely covered in mouse poop and shredded newspapers from the mouse nests. Now we're going to talk a bit about how a house gets into this condition here in just a bit. But first I wanted to talk about how bad it actually was, because really even the video doesn't capture how really in the weeds this house became. It's an elderly couple and both have disabilities. The woman has diabetes and she also has extreme mobility issues to the point to where she has been saving her used insulin needles, and I found at least 100, if not more than that. And I put those in containers and put them over to the side with the needles facing down. And then later we found a large biohazard disposal box that we could put those into, and then that way she could get those up to the hospital and have them properly disposed of. The mouse droppings and mouse nests were really, really bad. They were absolutely everywhere. They had destroyed so much of her paperwork that she was saving. The floors were so bad, I had to clean them with a paint scraper, then sweep, then mop, then paint scrape again, then mop again, then sweep again. I had to do that roughly 6 times, I believe, before the floor became clean. There was food dating back to 2020 and a couple of oddball pieces of food like canned goods that dated prior to that, like 2014. The oven was unusable, which reminds me I actually have to clean that oven. I haven't done that yet, but I will. There are some things we didn't do. I didn't get underneath the fridge. If you watch my videos before, you know that Hoarder refrigerators can get extremely heavy, and I've got a bad back, and so I can't move those without help. Like a lot of help. I also didn't clean the inside of the fridge. She said she was working on that, her and her husband. But the insides of the cabinets were so saturated in mouse droppings that we had to get rid of almost every piece of food that she had in there. I mean, it was all expired anyway, but even if it wasn't, I wouldn't feel safe keeping pretty much anything that she had in those cabinets. So how does a house get into this condition? There are a lot of factors. So one, I mentioned both of the husband and wife are disabled to varying degrees. The husband had taken 2 super nasty falls. One fractured his skull, and the other one broke or fractured his neck. The wife has diabetes, extreme mobility issues. She had, I think she said, a quadruple bypass. She had several shoulder surgeries. She actually had many, many surgeries. She had been in several car accidents. She's had deaths in the family, and it's just the perfect storm of loss versus the actual hoarding disorder itself that kicked it into overdrive and created what you're seeing here. This cannot be surpassed without therapy. I have mentioned that to them, and had there not been an attempt to clean clean it up, they very easily could have ended up in adult protective services. So typically the way that works from state to state is if there's an attempt to clean it up, adult protective services tends to back off and allow the cleanup to happen because they're seeing progress. And if there's no attempt to clean it up, then that's when they have to step in and start formal paperwork in order to get them into homes and things like that. Anyway, back to what actually causes this. When you get that perfect storm of mental illness versus anxiety and depression and physical injuries and loss and disabilities, and you already have a pre-existing hoarding disorder, what happens is the house starts to get dirty and your depression takes over and doesn't allow you to clean it. So it gets a little dirtier and a little bit more cluttered. And then you find yourself putting things like your drinking glass by where you're sitting, and then you don't bring it to the sink. Then you find your dishes piling up, and that gets overwhelming, so you just kind of let them go. And then your trash starts to overflow, and then you get like a big trash pile, so you start tossing other trash onto that trash pile, and it starts to grow and get bigger. The longer you go, the more overwhelming it becomes, so it's a self-feeding cycle. Over the course of years, that builds and builds and builds until it becomes your normal. And you know that it's not normal. You know that other people don't live like this, but there's nothing you can do about it mentally and physically. You're now at the point where you're too embarrassed to ask for help. You won't allow people in to fix things that get broken because you're ashamed of the condition of the place. So oftentimes there are electrical problems and plumbing problems that exist within the house, but they never get fixed. And then it just becomes this out of control freight train that you just can't stop. And you need an outside hand to come in and say, all right, I can help you get back to ground zero. But without therapy, that can very, very easily build up again. And it's one of the most common questions I get, which is, aren't you afraid the house is going to go right back to that condition again? And the answer to that is no, because I'm doing what I can to help, and I actually expect it to get back into this condition again. I'm not talking about this house specifically. I'm talking about all houses that are in this condition specifically from hoarding disorder. There's a high likelihood that they're going to return to this condition without therapy. But that shouldn't ever stop me from helping. I mentioned in another video that if a heroin addict were to come to me and ask me to help them get clean, I'm not going to say no, because you're just probably going to end up using heroin again. I'm going to do what I can to get them clean because they're asking for help and because my help is a good thing. Not just for them, it's not entirely altruistic, but it makes me feel good and feel like I have a purpose. So regardless of whether or not it goes back to that original condition, at least for these couple weeks or couple months, they have some peace in their house and they've got the elimination of stress that's just been eating them alive. And to me, that's worth the effort. Now, that being said, I was really, really impressed with her because she was in the other room doing things. Like she was going through paperwork and getting rid of the ones that she didn't need. Whenever I wasn't there, they were going through tubs that I had packed up to find what they needed to throw away versus what they wanted to keep. Now, this place is not going to be perfect overnight. It's just not. She is in a very severe hoarding cycle. I say she, it's both of them. It's the couple who's in the severe hoarding cycle. And that is extremely difficult to break. But they let me get rid of a bunch of stuff. We got a full dumpster and we filled it at least halfway full by the time I had to stop. And then she said she's going to actually leave the dumpster there rather than having it hauled off, because then she can at least bits at a time go through more tubs. So she is helping. That's something you hardly ever see in a hoarding situation. There are two things actually. One, you hardly ever see anybody throwing anything away at all or letting someone throw something away, but actively taking part in getting rid of things is a rarity. And I told her that she should be proud of that. The husband still works. So while I was doing this, he was off at his job, but there is still a massive amount of stuff that really needs to go. It's just she's not ready for it. So I was pretty careful about what I threw away and what I didn't. At the start, I just focused mainly on trash. And then if I happened to find some stuff that was broken or in what I would consider to be a near biohazard, for instance, things that were covered in mouse poop and pee, those things went. So even some stuff like some of her old cookbooks were just absolutely shredded from mice. Those just had to go. There was no discussion about about that. I couldn't allow those to be in the house. But those kinds of things were few and far between. The real thing that we're going to have to concentrate on, and you'll see this in the living room on the next video that I post, is there are 2 rooms, a computer room and a spare room that are completely packed from door to wall with just stuff. It's all smashed in together. The computer room, you can't open the door more than about 4 inches. The spare room, I got the door open enough for me to step inside, but I could only put my foot into the doorway before the horde stopped me. Realistically, all of that has to go. At least 90% of it, so that I can make room to put a lot of the stuff that we're going to be cleaning and packing away. Otherwise, it's just going to be sitting out in the kitchen. So we did what we could, but it has a long way to go before it's back to ground zero again. Now, the kitchen was so bad that I felt the need to basically clean all of our knickknacks and all of our shelving, because it had been so long since it had been done. I really didn't feel like it was safe. So that's one of the reasons this kitchen took so long. With both me and Adrian here, that's Thug, Lil Thug, it still took us 28 man hours. It was 7 hours one day and 7 hours the next day, multiplied by 2 people. So 28 hours to clean this kitchen. Another factor in that decision was that there was so much mouse and rat poison scattered everywhere that I could have filled my vacuum canister twice. Or you know those little bathroom trash cans? I could have filled one of those. Or if like you hollowed out my daughter's head, you could have filled her hollow, lifeless skull like say 3 times with just mouse and rat poison. We got all that cleaned up, and there were just so many things in here that I would have considered a biohazard that really both Thug and I should have had Tyvek suits on during this cleanup. And you'll see in the next video that I did have a Tyvek suit when I started cleaning up the living room, because we did find out that there is bed bugs in the house. They had spread to the living room, though they weren't quite as bad in the living room as what I had initially thought, but they are bad in the bedroom. I get that question a lot. Would I clean a house if I found out it had bed bugs? And I do, and I am in this video. And how I handle that is, after I get done with the cleaning, I have my wife open the garage door. I walk in with all my dirty stuff, my dirty rags and anything that I'm going to keep, and I close the garage door and strip down right there in the garage. And then I immediately throw my clothes in the washer on a hot cycle with extra soap, and then I run it through 2 drying cycles on the hottest setting, and that'll kill off any bed bugs. My shoes stay out in the garage, and I say bringing in my dirty stuff and my dirty rags that I'm going to keep, but in a house like this, I threw all of that away. I use the vacuum on their house, and then that vacuum either gets tossed or given to them, one of the 2. In this case, I gave her my vacuum. The mops and the brooms all get tossed. And the irony here is that I have to be able to clean it in order to get rid of the bed bugs, because the exterminator can't do much if the house is still piled up. So whether I wanted to clean it or not, if I truly want to help and we want to get rid of the infestation, I have to go in there and clean first to give the exterminator access to the things that he has to kill. So this would be step 1 in that process. Now, the actual process in which we're going to make this safe is a 1-2 punch that I use a lot whenever I'm going for sanitization over just shininess. And that is, I'm going to use Mr. Clean's Clean Freak in order to get rid of like the dirt, grease, and grime and oils. And that exposes the surface of anything we're touching, from knickknacks to shelving or whatever, Adrian's head face. Then I'm going to use my homemade APC. New users, that stands for all-purpose cleaner. It is a mixture of 70% isopropyl alcohol and 5 or 6 drops of Dawn dish soap. That kills any germs, any bacteria, and or demons, whatever you're cleaning, but it also has the added benefit of shining at the same time. So we're going to sanitize the entire room and not just clean it. For the floors, we end up using, at one point I sprayed them with straight APC, but we use Lysol to clean those because that's really good at sanitizing. But yeah, we're going to do that with pretty much every surface in this kitchen, and every knickknack, every cup. There's one cabinet full of old cups that they didn't use that I did not wash that they're going to have to wash. And that was just a case of time. I looked around the kitchen and was like, we could be here for a week on just the kitchen if I don't find a stopping point. So I left the handful of cups and stuff, and you'll see that coming up here in just a bit. And then I told those cups to suck it, and then I spin kicked Adri right in the neck because that's how I roll, son. And that's how she rolls. That's why they call her getting spin kicked in the neck by her dad Johnny back in Kansas City. They're like, yo man, is that old getting spin kicked in the neck by her dad Johnny? I don't know. Let's expose her neck and see if it gets footed. I bet it does. And it will. It will get footed. Now, one thing to note, this floor was so cluttered and there was so much stuff in this kitchen that it was one of those cases where I couldn't just move everything out of the kitchen and then clean the floor and then move everything back. Remember, the living room is a level 9 hoard. It is massively cluttered. So there's nowhere to put this stuff. So basically you have to clean everything in like a 5 foot by 5 foot area if you're lucky. Most of the time it was like 3 or 4 feet by 3 or 4 feet. And then I had to just take Mr. Clean and hand clean these floors to get the main part of the grime off of it, so that whenever I could come back later and Lysol it, the Lysol could make contact with the floor instead of the film of dirt and grime. So you'll see a picture here in just a bit of where I've hand cleaned versus where I haven't. And that picture's pretty crazy to see. I mean, you can see a pretty defined line on where I was cleaning versus where I stopped. Now, when I got to this little white cabinet over here, or shelving unit, this is where, if I had carte blanche to do whatever I wanted, that entire thing would have been thrown out in the dumpster. It's really old, it's wobbly, it's barely held together. She needs it in order to store her knickknacks, but the irony being that the knickknacks are causing a space issue. So if it was up to me, not only would that shelf have gone in the trash, but all of the knickknacks on it would have also gone in the trash. But that doesn't help her in any way by just throwing things away, because you see an end goal of, hey, the house needs to be opened up and cleaned and cleared out and decluttered. The easy thing to do would be to just throw it all away. What that actually does is it causes her a massive amount of anxiety, which then exacerbates the actual condition, which is triggered by anxiety. So in other words, what can happen is you get rid of the stuff without her permission, anxiety and depression hits, which then triggers more hoarding. So you're actually making the problem worse. Some people have tried to help her in the past, and they had just basically ransacked through her house and just tossed without her permission, and then you see where this ends up. I understand why people think that way, but when somebody comes in to say the comments and says, I would have just gutted the whole thing. No, you wouldn't have. One, you wouldn't have cleaned it at all. And then two, it would cost tens of thousands of dollars to gut this kitchen and just to get the stuff out and into a dumpster and the labor and everything that it involves. And three, it would have triggered the hoarding so badly that she would have lost trust in anybody helping her again. And then the hoarding just kicks up to another level. And in just a year or two's time, it would have been far, far worse than what it is right now. So suck it. The floor was a bit of a nightmare. Fortunately, she has really good linoleum in here. It was all stuck to the floor really well, meaning that the glue was intact. And so there weren't any bubbles. There wasn't any crackling whenever you stepped on top of it from old glue. So that meant that I could slop mop this, which means that I just take a mop and dip it in the Lysol and then dribble that Lysol all over the floor so that it has time to soak. While that's soaking, after it softens up the big chunks and stuff on the floor, then I can take a paint scraper and scrape that up, then mop it again, and then change the Lysol out with new Lysol, mop it again, and then just keep repeating that process until the mop water stops getting really dirty. You don't have to go until the mop water's clear or anything. That's insanity. But we keep doing that over and over again until the floor looks good. And again, we could only do half of the kitchen floor because the other half was just covered in stuff. So what we're doing is cleaning off one half of the kitchen, then moving the good items from the cluttered area to the now clean area for a temporary storage, and then cleaning the area that we just uncovered. So I mentioned in a lot of videos that it's like one of those old slider puzzles where you've got 9 squares, but one of them's missing. And if you manipulate them and slide them in the right way, eventually you can make a picture out of them all. It's the same thing here. It's like clear an area, clean it, then slide all that stuff into another temporary holding spot, and then clean the area that you've uncovered, and continue doing that in little squares until the whole thing's done. It takes a massive amount of patience, but fortunately my weird brain is all about those puzzles. It's how I see most rooms whenever I walk into them, is just a giant puzzle. So some of the things that they hoarded, even if some weren't intentional, she was shocked to find out how much vinegar she had. We kept 4 bottles, like gallon bottles, and then she had another one in her living room. I threw away at least 5 bottles, I think. So there was a bunch of that. They had a ton of light bulbs, a ton of coffee type stuff, mail from way back. If I should have genuinely bought her a paper shredder, because before she threw mail away, when I mentioned earlier how she was going through that while I was doing this, she would tear those into strips to protect her identity. I genuinely should have just gone to Walmart and gotten her a paper shredder, because then I could have handed her entire boxes of mail and just had her go crazy on shredding that stuff. There was so much of it. Realistically, they need to get rid of about 75% of their drinking glasses. There were at least 100 spoons, and then I was finding more all over the floor. They said they had even more in the backyard from where a family member had at one time, quote unquote, helped them clean, and then just threw all of the extra stuff out into the backyard in bags. And so there's a bag of silverware out there, but man, they definitely don't need it, because when Adrian was doing the dishes, it was mostly spoons. So much that we couldn't even fit them all in one drawer. We had to make 2 silverware drawers just to accommodate the spoons. And now I've got that Soundgarden song stuck in my head. This is the cabinet that I didn't wash the cups. I kind of wish I had, because it wouldn't have taken that long to do them, but also Adrian was doing dishes for hours, and so I couldn't really add more to her workload. It was just, we spent so much time in here. But this is also where you're going to start to see a massive amount of mouse poop and rust from canned goods, and so it took quite a bit to get all that cleaned and sanitized. While I have your ear, I'd like to ask you for a favor. If you want to help me in return for me helping these people, the easiest, coolest thing you can do is just hit the subscribe button. It doesn't really help me as far as YouTube algorithm or anything like that. I just personally want the gold plaque, and we are closing in on 250,000 subscribers right now, which is so far beyond what I ever thought this channel could do. It just blows my mind. And so we are, as of this video, at about 230,000 subscribers. I would love to see that hit 250,000. It would just make me really, really happy. If you're more into monetarily helping, we have a members only section, which is $4.99 a month, and you get an extra video every Wednesday. Most days I get super excited about a video and I get antsy like a little kid wanting to open a Christmas present early. Me posting a video is like that feeling to me. And so there's a lot of times where instead of posting on a Wednesday, I'll get antsy and post it on a Tuesday. But regardless, the idea is that every week you get an extra video, so suck it. But as I always say, if you can't afford that, please, please, please don't do it. I'm doing fine financially. That's just an extra way to support the channel and an extra way to get an extra video. I just said extra a bunch, like an extra amount. If you like sweet, fly, dope, whatever the bussin', whatever the word is kids are using today, merchandise, we sell t-shirts, mugs, stickers, all kinds of stuff with my goofy little dumb phrases on them. And I'm going to have links to the members section as well as the merchandise section in the description below this video. If you didn't know, we had 2 new t-shirts come out. I don't remember if it was the last week or the week before, but one of them has just the definition of the word joke on the front, which may be my new favorite t-shirt. I don't know why it makes me laugh so much. It's so sarcastic to me, and I love it. And another one is, if you've ever gotten a response from me whenever I've been like really busy and I've got a ton of comments, one way that I acknowledge that I've read somebody's stuff and that I like their comment is I'll put heart, fist bump. And that's just kind of my way of saying I love it, and here's a fist bump in emoji form. So I've got a t-shirt with those dumb emojis on the front of it. So anyway, if you're a member, I always announce those t-shirts before I announce them in public. And for like the first, I don't remember if it's 2 days or 3 days, they get a pretty healthy discount on those things. So I guess that's another way you can kind of benefit from the members section. Also, I post all those videos pantsless. So I'm not pantsless in the videos. I'm just pantsless when I make them. I don't know why that would benefit you at all, but it benefits me from the waist down. Hi-oh! Back to the many, many mouse and rat nests that I found in this house. One of them was, I think some people call this a lazy Susan or a swinging Betty or a round Glinda. I don't know what people call them, but there were some bags of flour down there, and the owner didn't know this, but mice like flour. I didn't for a long time. I didn't know that mice got into flour, but they evidently love it. So they had chewed through the side of the bag, gotten flour everywhere, and then set up shop in that thing. Beside it, you would have noticed there was a canned goods cabinet right beside that had a bunch of really black tarry looking stuff in there. And that was actually 2 cans of pineapple juice that had sat so long that the acidity of the juice ate through the can and then leaked out all over the other cans, which then caused a chain reaction of the pineapple juice eating through them, and they all just rusted out. So that was a combination of sugar and acid and rust, which I just took out with Mr. Clean's Clean Freak. I soaked that down and then let it sit for about 10 minutes, then soaked it down again and used a scouring pad to get it all off. For all the drawers, I pulled everything out and just vacuumed them, and then I sprayed those down with APC, let it set for just a minute or so, and then wiped it down. And that's enough to sanitize the drawers, because they all did have mouse poop and stuff in them. All the silverware that was in here all got washed, because I mean, it's literally sitting in mouse sewage, so I can't morally just clean out the drawer and put all those back in. Now, fortunately, I cleaned those myself, and Adrian just watched me do it because she didn't do any dishes at all. I did them all myself, and you'll see that on video here in just a bit, because that's just the kind of guy I am. They call me doing dishes all by myself and not Adri doing them, Johnny, back in Mexico City. Now, to even get to the dishes, we had to start putting things away, for instance, like bottles of cleaners, which is one thing I always find hoarded in hoarder houses. They have an overabundance of cleaning stuff. So we put all those away, which then exposed the stove. And then I was handing Adrian things to put in the cabinets, like some of the few clean dishes that were on the counter. Once we got those off, I just cleaned the stove with Mr. Clean's Clean Freak and then followed it up with APC. And now, little by little, we're making our way across the counter. Now, the goal is to be able to run dishwater and do all these dishes. But in order to do that, I first have to clean and sanitize the countertops as well as the sink itself. So this is a juggling game of cleaning, moving, little bits at a time so that we can even make the room to do the dishes. This is all in preparation, and it's very, very tedious. This is one of the reasons it's so overwhelming to people once that gets stacked up so high. Notice I'm handing Adrian dishes, and then she's putting those on the floor because they're the only place that we can put these. Plus, I told her, you put these dishes on the floor or I will elbow you in the temple and drop you with a stone cold stunner, son. And she started crying. I'm like, don't cry, just put them on the floor. Put them on the floor! Now that the sink is opened up, we're going to start taking off the little small appliances. So we had coffee maker, little electric mini oven thingy up there. I think that's what they call them up there. We had some mixers, KitchenAid, and they were all sitting on top of a mountain of mouse poop, mouse poison, and a ton of coffee grounds. Coffee grounds, spilt coffee. The counter was just, well, you can see it now that we're starting to pull things off of it, but it's just ground in brown. So obviously we can't do dishes and drain dishes on that. We have to clean it first. I should have backed the camera off and showed you the floor at this point, because as we're stacking stuff on the floor, the hoard is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's, again, another thing that can really discourage people, because they don't think they're making progress. They think they're messing it up, when in actuality, you're just temporarily holding it in those positions. Okay, so for the countertop, I just take a dry rag and get all the loose stuff off. And just to note, I threw away every rag that we used in this place. Then I saturated that with Mr. Clean so bad that it formed puddles. While that was still soaking, I wet down the sink and then used Barkeeper's Friend. Now this is a porcelain sink, a really old school porcelain sink. So I'm going to use a scouring pad to get off the main part of the stains, and then I'm going to use a trick that a lot of people never think about. But any of the stains that you have left after you've cleaned it, you can use toilet cleaner. Specifically, I use Clorox with bleach, and I use the clinging gel because it holds onto the sides of the sink a little bit better, so it makes contact for longer. So I'll rinse all this off, kind of give it a quick wipe down. Then I will use our toilet cleaner, and then we take another break for another like 15 minutes. While you're putting it on, you'll be like, "Do you like that sink?" And it's all like, "I do likes it when you puts the toilet cleaner on my sink body. I am a talking sink." So I just scrub that off with scouring pad again, rinse it down, and now it looks just like a brand new sink. It's crazy how different that looks. Now I'm just going to bounce to the countertop. Notice how much that cleaner is puddled. And then I'm going to use a scouring pad, wipe it down with my rag, and then I'm going to APC it right in the face. Now we could have gone a step further. I could have used a magic eraser to get off even more stains, but again, we could have spent a week in this kitchen. You have to find a stopping point. So I got it cleaned and sanitized, but I'm not worried about stains just yet. We can do that later. Here you can see me doing the dishes here too. I did change outfits and dropped about 2 feet in height, but Adri just kind of stepped back and watched me doing these dishes, mainly because she's a piece of crap. No, but for real, like while she was doing this, I was over on another countertop, de-hoarding that. It was, if you can see in the background how all those books and stuff are stacked up, there's like one section that's really stacked. The entire thing was like that. And in fact, it was a little worse on the right-hand side. So I was uncluttering all that and uncovering even more mouse poop and so many diabetic needles. You can see I'm stacking 2 cups with the needles pointing down for the ones that were uncapped, because there were a bunch that were uncapped. So I had to really take my time in order to make sure I didn't get stuck by accident. And then I ended up putting those containers on top of an unused dishwasher, and then we found the biohazard box and put those up with it, so then she could dispose of those herself, which should be pretty easy because the tops of those things can come off and she can just dump those in. But yeah, those really need disposed of. She had another large container of those in one of the hoarded spare rooms that I'll show you on another video. But there were hundreds of these. Well, I wouldn't say hundreds. I would say there was at least 100 of them that I found. I'm hoping there's a program out there that can get her a weekly housekeeper once I get this all cleaned and back into shape, and maybe even like a weekly nurse or somebody who can come by and collect her needles to dispose of, because again, they are disabled. She does have mobility issues. Getting out and around is not something she can do every day, but I'm not aware of how those programs work. I know that some people have told me before that there are programs where the state will pay for housekeepers to come in for people who are disabled, but I have no idea what those programs are or even who to ask about them. Now, one of the saddest parts about this particular house is that there are a lot of things she wants to do, specifically revolving around crafting. So she wants to turn her computer room into a craft room where she can crochet, which is totally doable. And she wants to turn the spare bedroom into storage, which is the way I want to do it, because that's the most logical place to do storage in the house. She wants to set up her old VCR so she can watch old VCR type movies, and I get that nostalgia too. So it's totally cool. I could totally do all that. The sad part is that there's only one thing stopping any of that from happening, and that's the hoard itself. If we were to be able to clear out both of those spare rooms, the computer room and the proper spare room, we could absolutely make those things happen in like a day. But the problem is those other rooms are so hoarded that the only solution outside of just throwing away everything is to bring in one tub at a time and have her go through it and then tell us what to keep and what to throw away. And that is going to take days, especially whenever you see the one spare room that's so tightly packed. It'll take days just to go through it. And then we have to hope that she throws away enough in order to progress and to utilize that room for storage, because even if she got rid of 75% of the things in those rooms, there would still be too much stuff to put back. It would still be ultra hoarded. So I gave her a heads up toward the beginning of this that the ultimate goal would be if 10 items passed through her hands, 9 of those items would be thrown in the trash. Now, that's not doable for most hoarders. The disorder overrides their desire to have a clean, clear home. Imagine if every time you turned on your kitchen light, the garbage disposal came on too, because there was some weirdness with your wiring that made the lights and the garbage disposal connected. Eventually, you'd stop turning on that light switch because the garbage disposal would be too annoying. And you can't really get in there and fix it yourself because you're not an electrician, so you would need to call an electrician to help you out. That's kind of what it's like on hoarding disorder. There's a misfire in the wiring, if you will, that makes the emotional connection to objects so powerful that it's like throwing away a memory, throwing away a pet or a child. And the only way to get past it is to get outside help to fix it for you. It's important to know that that outside help is not the therapist themselves, it's the therapy. No one can come in and fix you, but they can facilitate the therapy that can. And anyway, that doesn't happen overnight. That takes a very long time to do. It takes dedication, and it takes a therapist who knows what they're dealing with in order to help steer you in the right direction and make sure that you're thinking positively about the process. Once she reaches that point, whether she gets therapy or not, and again, I keep saying she, but that's who I'm dealing with in this cleanup. It's a two-person problem, so like they would have to get therapy. But once they get to that point, then all bets are off. We can do whatever we want to that house and turn it into a crafting dream world if they want. But it's not going to happen overnight. This is a very, very good first step in that direction. And I'm really proud of her for being able to jump in and take care of old paperwork, and she's really putting forth the effort to go through tubs that I'd set aside, and she really has thrown away some stuff that she struggled to get rid of before. So she's making great effort. I hope that her husband can do the same, because I think that as a team, if they're both going in the same direction, they can really get past this. They've got a really good chance of progressing and turning their home back into a nice, safe, comfortable existence. Members, I will see you this Wednesday. Everybody else, I will see you next Saturday. We'll have part 2 ready to go by then. If not Saturday, then Sunday at the latest, and I'll be able to show you the living room, which was extremely exhausting to clean. I'd show it to you now, but it's not quite done just yet. I got to go back this weekend. Anyway, I'll see you next weekend. Don't forget to hit subscribe unless you want this elbow right in your neck face. Later.